somewhere in our grade school, we start looking at our work or our artwork as not being good, or not feeling, comfortable about sharing it, or not feeling confident about it. And as we get older, I think that happens more and more. And so we say that we're not an artist unless we are selling that art, unless it's being recognized by a gallery or by some other body of people that say that this is art. And I don't think that's true. There are so many artists that don't even sell their work, and they create beautiful artwork. So I believe that, we are all artistic in some way, and it doesn't have to be painting. Like my brother who's in construction, he's very creative in his own way, like my father was. I mean, creativity comes in so many different forms. And I feel that if more folks recognize their creativity, no matter how small or insignificant they believe it is, I believe that creativity brings more happiness to folks.
Betty Franks is a Canadian-born artist who was raised in San Jose, California, where she still lives and works. After a long career in customer service management, at 50, Betty had an epiphany one day in an art workshop that changed her life forever. We'll ask her about that in a minute. Now she is an established artist whose bright, happy, cheerful abstract paintings are enjoyed by masses of people all over the world, from California to New Zealand. And she has taught tens of thousands of others how to paint via her YouTube channel. Today, she joins us to chat about her lightbulb moment, her relationship with creativity, and what she had to let go of to get to where she is today. Betty, welcome. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Super thrilled to be here, Kate. Thank you.
I've enjoyed and admired your work from afar up here in Vancouver for a really long time. So it really feels like a privilege to be chatting with you today.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for making the time. Before we get into it, I wanted to give a little bit of a background for our listeners about why I've created this podcast and what it's about. And essentially what it comes down to is, throughout my own career as an artist, I've heard so many times from people, almost every time somebody finds out that I'm an artist, there's this wistful little voice that pops out and says, "Oh, I wish I could be an artist. But I just don't have any talent, or I'm just not, it's not in me." And through my own relationship with creativity and learning how it moves, and I've come to realize that wishing is actually creativity banging on the door to be let out. And so I get actually really, where I used to get really sad, and I didn't really even know how to, people would say that to me and I would sort of feel uncomfortable or awkward, or like, "Oh, well, I have this thing that you want." And I like, now I get excited when I hear people say that, because, and I tell them, "Oh, well, that wish, like, this is a really good thing. Like, let's follow that wish." And so, this podcast is really an answer to that wish. And I want to help people find that within themselves. So I particularly excited to have you here today to talk about this, because when I followed your story and realized that it sounded like you had a similar sort of trajectory in your life, where you had this thing that was inside of you that was sort of wishing to get out. And eventually you had this wonderful experience and you answered that call. And it kind of, I want to hear more about, well, a little bit, what was your career like, and being a customer service, and how did creativity speak to you throughout those years? What were the tip-offs looking back? Can you see that there were clues that it was trying to come and get you, or what?
There were probably clues there, definitely. I grew up with a mom that taught me how to sew, crochet, knit, cook, do all those things, in addition to cleaning the house, of course. And then my father he started off as a cabinet maker in Canada. And then when we moved here to San Jose, California, he got into construction. So he's always been very creative as well in his own way. So I think I picked up a lot of creativity just by being around them and learning from them.
Through osmosis.
Exactly. And really, I didn't get into expressing my creativity. I guess there were some ways that I did that when I was early, when I was a bit younger. However, I really didn't get into much of that until before my 50th birthday, when I was creating making these cards on the weekends and really having a lot of wonderful downtime for myself, which was stamping and, trying to get everything lined up just perfect to make the most beautiful birthday card, which, would take me hours to do,
Yeah.
as opposed to spending a few dollars at the store. I enjoyed that time to myself to just get creative and be in my own zone. And it was just before my 50th birthday, I came across mixed media on the internet somewhere, and I don't remember where, but I can tell you I knew exactly. I still remember where I was when I saw it, because it was that totally falling in love moment that I will never forget. And I remember thinking to myself, this is what I want to be doing. This is what I want, because stamping something imperfectly made it perfect. And that's what I wanted. I wanted that looseness and freedom that I didn't have in making these, perfect little cards. So, I explored mixed media for a number of years, just creating really small, like I started off on like 3x5 cards, and then 4x6, and then moved up to 5x7. And then I went to a workshop up in Canada with Donna Downey. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's a mixed media artist, and she's just fabulous. And she gave us 16x20-inch canvases. And I looked at that and thought, how in the world am I going to create on this? It's so huge compared to what I was doing. So that was kind of my first step into, painting a bit bigger. And then from there, I just spent a few years creating mixed media art. And then I decided, I went to, and again, Canada. I don't know what is it about Canada?
Here.
It is.
I don't know.
Other than being born there, it seems like some of my big moments are tied to Canada. But I did go to a workshop in Victoria, and it was a workshop that was all about the artists and the inside of the artist, not so much what they were producing. So a lot of learning and letting go of stuff, things of that nature. But I decided at that workshop that I wanted to be an abstract artist. And that's where I drew the line in the sand. And I said, okay, from this day forward, I'm an abstract artist. That's what my focus is. And so I packed up all my mixed media stuff. I got rid of stuff. I sold some stuff. Majority of it I just gave away. Just gave away tons of stuff that I was using over the years, because I didn't want to be distracted. I had this goal that I loved abstract. I suddenly fell in love with abstract work, and I just was like, I want to be an abstract artist. That's what I want to do. So I had to get rid of everything else in order to be able to really focus on that.
So just going back to that I'm trying to imagine you in this workshop and something happened. There was like a light bulb moment at one point where you had that desire kind of came cracking through the surface, and you were able to articulate, I want to be an abstract artist. So
yes.
Can you go back to that moment? Have you ever gone back to that moment and thought about what was that? What happened?
Yeah. And to be honest with you, that moment actually happened before that workshop.
Okay.
So in preparation for that workshop, I said, that's it. From this workshop forward, I am an abstract artist. This is where I want to start doing that kind of work, and just focus on that. So it was exciting to prepare for that. I showed up with 36x36-inch canvases, and I was just like,
ready.
30x40s. I'm like, this is it. I'm going big or going home. And so it was very exciting for me. It was this kind of transitional moment in, going from mixed media and venturing into something new. Now, it was also difficult. It was a period of growing again and learning and figuring things out. And that part, as you know, is never easy, but you have to go through that to get to, to become a better artist and to be able to create art that you're happy with, that you're satisfied with, that you're ecstatic about.
Yeah. What was that? What would you say was the hardest part of that? Like, I love the image of you sort of just putting your, staking your claim, but like a flag on the moon, kind of like, this is what I'm going to do. And then I know for me, sometimes when I'm in front of a canvas, especially like this huge one behind me, sometimes I go into it with this intention of I'm going to be totally free and wild, and then I get there and something sort of, I can feel me going up into my mind, and I start to want to make it good. And as soon as I start to want to make it good, that's when I know the bad painting is on its way, because I feel like it's that like trying. So what
Yep.
for you in that process, I imagine you didn't just go from saying you wanted to be a great abstract artist to just being it the next day. So that you're saying that it was hard. There was what was the hardest thing?
I think the hardest thing was, and it took me several years, because that was 2015 when I went to that workshop. And in 2018 is when I finally figured out my style. So those 3 years, although that doesn't seem like very long looking back now, but
It does when you're living it, though.
exactly. So when you're living it, it was very frustrating because first of all, I couldn't figure out abstract art. Like, how do I create something? Is there a focal point? Is there a composition I should be figuring out? So in the beginning, I actually cheated a bit. And what I did was I created abstract landscapes,
Okay.
because that was kind of my transition. It was a way to go from, okay, something I'm familiar with, a landscape, and abstracting it I can do, because there's kind of this element of a sky or water or land. And so that was my way of slowly transitioning into it. And then from there, I just started like making marks, putting stuff down. I took some workshops also with some favorite artists, and that really helped me. And I always seem to pick up something from each workshop that I could apply to my own work. And there were just days where I remember being in the studio and just looking at what I'm doing and going, I just don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to do, but I have no clue what I'm doing, but I just have to keep going. I need to put my blinders on and just not pay attention to everything else. Because at that point I was on social media looking at what other people were doing. And there were days that was so frustrating for me, because I would look at somebody who, and I knew at the time, was way further ahead in their journey than I was. But yet I would still look at that and say, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I figure this out? And so I had to put those blinders on and say, Betty, just keep creating, just stay focused, keep doing what you're doing. And I couldn't get to where I was unless I just kept putting down paint, kept putting down marks, kept trying to figure things out.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of artists talk about the importance of it being a practice, treating it like a job, all kinds of variations on that theme, and how when you do that, when you put that kind of effort in and that kind of time in, when you practice anything, you're going to start to get better at it. Do you find that do you feel like there's, for me, and again, I've talked to a bunch of artists who have something similar, but for me, it's almost like there's a wordless voice inside me that's trying to say something, and that it needs me to hold the paintbrush, and I need it to tell me what to do, because if I start to try to paint from my head, no good is going to come from that. Do you have that sort of relationship with like the energy of creativity itself? Like, do you feel like it's a being almost that's trying to, or like an intelligence of some kind that's trying to?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think for me, I get this like overwhelming feeling within me that needs to be let out in a creative way, because I'm not a writer. I can't write, but this is my way of expressing joy that I feel and happiness that I feel. And for those folks who are not familiar with my artwork, it is inspired by my love for fields of flowers. And so it's that, that feeling of being near flowers. And it could be just a bouquet of flowers. It doesn't always have to be a field of flowers, because I just love all flowers. And it's being in that moment of how I feel when I look at a flower. And that's what I'm trying to project onto a canvas or onto paper when I'm creating.
And then so that the viewer can also experience that joy. So you're almost amplifying that feeling of joy that you have recognized out there in the world.
Exactly. I'm trying to get that out there so that other folks are feeling that same type of joy.
That's beautiful. I know a lot of our listeners are people who are either in their early stages of claiming themselves as an artist, or maybe just love art and don't have a need to claim themselves as an
Right.
artist. But I know a lot of people, there are things about creativity that I think we collectively believe that are, I can see some of them and think, well, that's not true. That's not true. What's something that you think or you see a lot of people seem to believe about creativity that you know is not true?
I would say that I think a lot of people believe that they're not an artist. And so, I certainly went through that stage as well. And so I feel that, somewhere in our grade school, we start looking at our work or our artwork as not being good,
Hmm.
or not feeling comfortable about sharing it, or not feeling confident about it. And as we get older, I think that happens more and more, and so we say that we're not an artist unless we are selling that art, unless it's being recognized by a gallery, or by some other body of people, that say that this is art. And I don't think that's true. There are
Hmm.
so many artists that don't even sell their work, and they create beautiful artwork. So I believe that we are all artistic in some way, and it doesn't have to be painting. Like my brother, who's in
Hmm.
construction, he's very creative in his own way, like my father was. I mean, creativity comes in so many different forms, and I feel that if more folks recognize their creativity, no matter how small or insignificant they believe it is, I believe that creativity brings more happiness to folks.
Hmm.
And being in that creative state and doing something that you really enjoy, and you are creating something from nothing, is I feel like it's a place where, if more of us spend time there, that we'll feel a bit more calmer and happier in life in general.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely there's so many healing benefits to art. One of the other people that I've talked to for this podcast, she actually has a company where she makes these really amazing watercolors, and she was saying that sometimes she'll just even just get one color and wet a paintbrush if she's feeling sad or whatever, and just move the paint around.
Yeah,
There's something just very soothing and therapeutic around moving. It's because it's color. I think it has a lot to do with color and our relationship
absolutely.
to color and the yeah.
This episode of Creative Genius is brought to you by Morning Moon Nature Jewelry. Instantly familiar, yet unlike anything you've ever owned, this extraordinary handcrafted heirloom jewelry is famous for its incredible detail of actual textures from nature. Get 15% off your first order and feel the wonder. Use coupon code CreativeGenius at lovemorningmoon.com.
What was the worst advice you ever got about creativity or your creativity or you being creative? Did you ever have
Wow,
any?
the worst advice. That's a hard one. I don't have anything that's coming to mind.
Maybe you're just a lucky person who didn't have a lot of negative Nellies around you who are saying, don't do it. Don't. You can. I had a lot of people saying, you can't, nobody will pay money for art, and you can't, that's not good. Like I had a lot of those in school, and those sort of cultural conditioning moments where we're taught how to unart our lives or how to unbe creative.
Yeah, and I'd have to say along those lines, because I didn't go to art school, didn't I wasn't part of that. And so when I started getting creative and sharing that, especially on social media, I started off sharing it on Facebook, and I got a lot of positive responses from the work that I did. And then branching out onto Instagram, so there was a lot of good feedback that way. I would say my family was supportive as well. They didn't always, when I started doing abstract, they didn't understand it, but they were supportive of it, which I appreciated very much.
Yeah,
And they did like my abstracted landscapes, because excuse me, again, that was something that they could understand
right.
easily, just like I did in the beginning. um, I do get, because I've got a YouTube channel, I do get negative comments, not so much on Instagram or Facebook, but YouTube, for some reason, I seem to get a lot more there. and I've learned to grow a thick skin over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think that folks who are negative towards other artists about what they're doing, I believe that they have something going on in their own lives
Mm-hmm.
that is making them project that onto others. So
Mm-hmm.
I try to take it with a grain of salt, that there's something going on in their lives that they're just not happy, and unfortunately they're feeling this need to lash out at other
Mm-hmm.
folks.
Yeah, I think if you're in a place where you're this open channel for expressing joy and with the intent to share that with others, anybody who's going to come in and say anything negative about that, you nailed it. Like I really feel like it says more about what they're going through and their
Yes.
worldview and all that kind of thing. I want to just go back for a second when you talked about I'm just again imagining you stamping and trying to line everything up perfectly and going from that world to this. Your work is so free and so joyful and so flow, I guess is the
Mhm,
word that comes
mhm.
up when I think about your work. So what was the process like for you to go from like what was there stuff you had to let go of? Like I've never been the person who tries to line things up. I'm always like, let's make it as messy as possible. But what was that like for you to go from that sort of like tight precision to this open flowy? What was that journey like?
Yeah, I would say that type precision was more my personality than being an abstract artist the way I am today, because I'm very much, um, being in my career in customer service management for over 20 years and managing folks and having to run reports and do presentations requires a skill where you're on top of everything, and everything
Mm-hmm.
has to be, I had checklists for everything. I had to make sure that, things were being done at a certain time. I had to understand numbers. I had to be able to create Excel spreadsheets to track information. So the very analytical side of me and the very controlling, like understanding everything that's going on all the time, I had to let go of all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really, I think that's what made part of the transition so difficult for me, is having to let go and learning to loosen up and relax and paint more within, as opposed to, having a checklist of things that I should be putting into a painting.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of relaxing more and not thinking too much about what I was creating, but just the act of doing. Because in the act of doing and creating, you're going to create a lot of bad, ugly art.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to learn from those pieces what works and what doesn't work. A great example is, I think a lot of artists that are just getting started get into this problem with their paint colors where they're creating mud,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't figure out how to keep their colors bright and happy and vivid. And that's something that I learned somewhere along the line, and honestly I don't know where I learned it, but I learned to keep my colors separated
Mm-hmm.
so that I would only work with warm colors for a layer, let that dry, and then I would come in with cool colors, let that dry. And I made a point of not mixing my colors unless I wanted to create mud,
Mm-hmm.
unless I wanted it to create a neutral, then I would mix the colors. But that was something that I learned, in the process, because I was creating mud in the beginning as well. I was mixing my warms and my cools, and I was like, well, these don't look happy to me. I'm not projecting my happiness. So
Yeah.
somehow I figured that out to keep those separate. And to this day, I still do that. And it served me well, because the colors that I'm trying to project are these gorgeous flower colors, these vivid yellows and reds and oranges and blues and purples. And so, it was something that I learned along the way.
I love that. Yeah. And also the other thing that I wanted to ask you is do you feel like every painting has an ugly stage?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Absolutely. Every single one of my paintings goes through an ugly stage, and that stage can last for several layers.
And how do you know? So sometimes the muddiness, I think, can come from, like you said, mixing warm and cool colors together.
Yes.
But sometimes the muddiness can also come from trying to just do too much when the painting actually really seems to just need you to walk away from it for a bit. It can be muddy in terms of energy, or there's another layer of muddiness, not just colors. How do you know? Do you have like a light bulb that goes off, or a little flashing light that goes off somewhere inside you that says, "Oh, actually, you're trying too hard. Maybe it's time to step back." What does that feel like for you?
Yeah, one thing that I learned a few years ago, and I remember this because it was summertime and I brought my studios out in the garage. I've got two studios now, one still at home in my garage and one that I rent in downtown San Jose. But at that time, this was about 3 years ago, I believe, I brought paints into the house because my garage studio was getting way too hot. California summers can be
Oh,
pretty hot.
can't even imagine.
Although I don't have air conditioning in my house does stay cooler because I've got some huge elliptus, eucalyptus trees.
Oh,
I was trying to
wonderful.
come up with the right name. So these huge trees that help keep the house cool. I set up my painting on my dining room table, and within that same space, I have a TV on the far wall where our family room is. So I put that on and I started listening to YouTube videos on artists that famous artists and their background and their history, and I was creating. That was a huge light bulb moment for me because what I discovered was I was creating these pieces that I absolutely was falling in love with.
Oh,
And the reason I was falling in love with these pieces is because I was listening to something. I was listening to words being spoken, not so much watching the screen because I was busy painting,
right.
but I was listening to words, and my brain was not judging what I was doing. It
Mm-hmm.
was not giving me negative self-talk that we all do, like,
Mm-hmm.
Betty, why'd you put down that color? Or why are you mixing those colors together? Or what kind of mark is that? Where are you going with this? I couldn't do those things because my brain was so engaged with listening to the videos being
Mm-hmm.
presented, the words being spoken. And that was a light bulb moment for me because going forward from there, I very rarely will listen to music when I'm creating. And the times that I do, I can honestly look at a work in progress and say, I was not listening to words, I was listening to music because I don't like that at all. I
Wow.
don't like where that went. And I need to start all over with that. So so again, it's rare that I listen to music. Every once in a while, I'm in the mood for it, but for the most part, I'm always listening to audiobooks or podcasts or videos on YouTube.
So to give that part of you that wants to be in control a job. So you go over here and you have this, you listen to this very intellectual thing or whatever it is, it, and I'm going to come over, and then it frees up this other part of you to paint. I
Exactly.
love that.
Exactly. And I was trying to tie that in with what you had asked me, and I'm hoping that I did because now I forgot the
Oh,
question you had asked
doesn't
me.
matter. It's all right. I loved where it went.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like there's sort of another layer to this question, which is like, what would happen if we could give that part of us a job to do in just
Mhm.
everyday life? Because I feel like that part of us that wants to be in control and
Yep.
is just constantly narrating, like, you messed that up, and why
Yes.
didn't you do this? And you're not doing it fast enough, and you're not on the
Yes.
right path. And oh, like, be quiet.
Yep.
How can we take that lesson that you just shared with us? And because we can't be going around listening to podcasts all the time as much as we'd love to, how can we give that part of ourselves a job so that this other part of us can lead our lives? Can you imagine how our lives would look if they were led from that place?
Exactly. Yeah, it would be wonderful. And I think it all
Ah.
comes down to changing that negative self-talk into positive words and
Mhm.
being gentle with yourself and being kind to yourself. And I think that's something that I need to work on. I know a lot of folks need to work on that as well to just feel happier every day by not hearing that negative self-talk.
What do you, so when you have, for example, maybe you're having a day, like there's a day when there's less negative self-talk, and then you're in the studio, you're having a day where it's just like that part of you for whatever reason is just like, hello, I'm here and I'm going to give you a bunch of bad ideas about yourself. what are some of the strategies that you use to be gentle with yourself in those moments when the the limiting beliefs just seem overwhelming?
Yeah, I believe, in the beginning, you were talking about artists who wish that they could be artists. And that action of just saying, I wish I could be an artist, is putting it out into the universe. And I'm a true believer in messages that will kind of become ingrained into my subconscious. So, for example, I've got this big sign over on my wall in front of me, and it says, I am successful in whatever I choose to do. And so that's a message that I see every day that reminds me that, whatever I put my mind to, I can do those things. I have messages that I post all over the place. And I've been doing this way before I even became an artist. I've been doing it for many years. And my dad actually makes fun of me sometimes. And he says,
Ah,
remember when you used to put these signs up, in your apartment? Because I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to buy a townhouse. And so I put up signs that would remind me of that message and help me in my journey to get there. And so I truly believe in constantly, like on my phone every day, I have a message that a different message comes up every day. And I think today's message, and I left it on here because I want to read it throughout the day. And it says, it's an affirmation. It says, I'm always open to new ideas and thoughts. So I just have all of these, messages everywhere. And I think they really help me throughout each day, even the days that are not going well. I've got a message posted somewhere that is going to remind me that life is okay, and keep going, keep at it, and you're doing fine, and keep going.
I love this so much. I feel like what you're doing is you're leaving yourself these little life preservers scattered throughout your day, so that, because I know that when those dark thoughts can come in, it can feel like it can feel overwhelming. It can feel like you're
Yes.
lost. It can feel, and so if you have these little, and I think some of the greats, I don't know, if you know who Louise Hay is.
Mm.
She was she was sort of a spiritual self-healing, self-help author.
Mhm.
And one of her things was to leave yourself. And if you came to my house
Yeah.
right now, you'd see I have post-it notes also all over the house that are, because it seems like maybe those negative beliefs are they win when we allow them to be the thing that's on repeat. And if we
Yes.
can counter what's on repeat, even if it's like, I think I can with these
Yes.
affirmations, you're sort of neutralizing some of that. Oh, I love that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that so much.
I have another one that I have posted in the bathroom because we all spend time in the bathroom getting ready in the morning.
Yeah.
And it says, I do wonderful work in a wonderful way with wonderful people for wonderful pay.
Oh, okay.
And
So for the people listening, stop, pause it,
well, and
rewind, and then, yeah.
yeah, and let me just say, that's not one that I came up with. It's one that I got out of a book that I listened to, probably like 10 times. But there were these great
Awesome.
sayings, and I saved this one. And it was actually a lady that ended up opening a flower shop that she had for over 20 years. And she just, she came up with that saying before she got the flower shop and figured out what she wanted to do with her life.
I love it. Well,
So
and I want people to pause and rewind and listen to that again and write it down and put it on your wall. I feel like that's such a good one.
yes, it is. It is.
Oh, I
It's a
love
very
that.
positive, and I love seeing it in the morning because it just, sets the mood for the day right away.
Yeah, yeah. Do you do you feel like you ever get blocked creatively, like for more than just a moment where you can talk yourself out of it? Like, are there stretches in your life when you're just like, huh, what's happening right now? I can't seem to.
Um, Honestly, I haven't had big stretches at all. What I have found is that I know some folks say, you should create every day. You should get in there and be creative every day. And there are no shoulds. So that doesn't work for me. If I go in the studio day after day and try to be creative, and I especially have a hard time when I go to a workshop where I'm in there for 4 days in a row and I have to be creative,
On
during
demand.
that whole time. Yeah, pretty much on
Mhm.
demand. I find that my creativity kind of pours out of me if I don't go to the studio for a day or two. So that's not to say that I don't go for 2 days in a row. Sometimes I'll go for 2 days in a row, but during the week, on a typical week, I go to the studio maybe 3 or 4 times, and for maybe 2 to 3 hours. Sometimes maybe it'll stretch out to 4 if I'm feeling good, or even 5. But even during that whole period of time, I'm not creating the whole period of time. I sit, I look at what I'm working on, I do other things, varnishing, or, doing other
Mm-hmm.
things related to art. But I have found that I, I can't be creative every day. It drains me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it drains me emotionally the most. It's like I just can't get that out of me, because I'm just too exhausted. And so by focusing on other things, the business side of running an art business allows me to, do that kind of work, and then that creativity kind of builds up in me, and then I get over to the studio and I unleash that.
I love that you've paid such close attention to yourself and are allowing yourself to move the way that you need to move. Because I think so often the temptation can be like, well, I'm doing this and I should, and it needs to look like this. And I sometimes sit here thinking, like it's so hot in Vancouver right now.
Yes.
And there's all this wildfire smoke. And I can't even make my bed. I don't want to. And I tried to do some painting the other day, and the paint was drying before. It's just not the right time to paint.
Yeah.
And I find myself kind of feeling this sort of like anxious, like, but you have this time and whatever. No, and so I think what you're sharing with everybody here is really important. So you need to get to know how creativity wants to move through you. And for you, that's the rhythm.
Yes.
You've gotten to know it and you honor it. And I love that. And for somebody else, maybe it's, they need to have a daily practice because they get too far away from it, so thank you for sharing that. Cause I think that's
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what's important is that you try everything. Try creating 5 days in a row and see, what does that feel like? Does that work for you? Does it not work for you? I know I read about an artist that would spend 1 week being just creative, just going to the studio and create. And then the following week, she would just do her art business. She would be, doing her, what I call the desk work, taking care of all of the marketing and the uploading of images and answering emails and things of that nature. So it's different for everybody. So I think it's so important that you try all these different things and figure out, what works for you. Another great example is years ago, I did a 30-day challenge where you had to create a piece of art every day for 30 days.
Yeah.
It was so difficult for
Yeah.
me to do that. And at the end, the person that was leading this, she asked everybody, well, how did it go? What did it feel like? And all that. And then she also said, I hate it and I don't do them. And so I was like, oh my God, I didn't have to do this, but yet I'm glad I went through the experience, because what I've learned is I do not work well in any kinds of challenges. Like, for example, right now there is an August Artists Challenge, which is every day in August, you can, there's a list of things to do each day on Instagram. And so you can, this day do this, on this day do this. So for the whole month of August, which is just fabulous, if you're just getting started and you don't know what to do. But I'm not participating because I know me. I don't like doing those things. I don't like that pressure of having to do something every day. That cuts into my creativity, even if it's just posting on Instagram.
Yeah. And now that you can articulate that and say it and claim it, it can just be like, you can honor that. And then you get to, there's almost like a freedom through knowing that that's just not something, like knowing what you don't want is just as important as knowing what you do want, and what doesn't work is just as important as knowing, helping you find what does work. Because I kind of feel like we're sort of feeling around in the dark in our lives, like, yeah, I like this, or I don't like that, or, and it's kind of, we're being guided by that if we can, if we can allow ourselves to. Yeah. I have one other thing that I've started to do on that I think is really fun, that I think you're going to really love. I have this beautiful, the listeners can't see this, but I'm going to show it to you on the Zoom. It's a beautiful wooden bowl.
Yes.
It's carved in the shape of a heart. I absolutely love it. And in it, I have I don't know, maybe 200 cards, 100 cards, and they all have just sort of one word on them.
Okay.
And so I'm pulling this card for you and for me and for the listener today. And if you're listening to this, there's a reason that you're listening to this. This card belongs to all of us. And this is how we relate. We're going to think about this as we relate to creativity. So abundance. I really love that. And I think, well, do you want to say what that means to you in terms of creativity, abundance, and how it relates to creativity?
Oh, sure. So for me, the word abundance, right away, I think about the ability to express myself in so many, I want to say in so many different ways, but yet at the same time, I have this specific style. And to me, I feel like, and I've had this question come up recently several times, which is, Betty, are you getting tired of creating the way you create? And are you going to do something different? Are you going to change your style? And it really kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I really had to think about that. And the thought that came up right away was the style that I create in, although people recognize it, and each piece, some folks say they all look the same or they're all similar. Yes, they are, but each one is, to me, so unique and so different. And each one came from a different place in my heart at the time that I was creating. And to me, that's abundance. It's like I have endless abundance when it comes to creating the art that I create. And that just made me so happy to come to that realization after seeing those questions and thinking about it and pondering it and trying to figure out what did that question really mean to me, and what does my art mean to me. So I just feel like I have this abundance amount of uh, love and joy that I want to pour out into my paintings.
Oh, I love that. And I mean, just to reflect back to you, my experience of you is just that you are a joyful, open, happy person. And I see it's like your channel is open, or I think sometimes of creativity as a garden hose with water coming through it, or, and there's no kink in your hose. You're wide open, which is why I think you can access that abundance. And I think that ultimately we all have that capacity. It's just about, how do you deal with these negative thoughts and beliefs, and how do you let go of the things that aren't working, and all the wonderful things that you've done to get yourself to where you are. And I think that hearing those things, I hope for everybody listening right now that it's that those things have really inspired you, because they've absolutely inspired me to honor what my limits are, honor what I don't want to do, honor what isn't working, let go of what isn't working. I mean, you talked about getting rid of and selling all of those art supplies. And I think those things they may seem insignificant, but they're all really, really important for helping you get to where you are. So it's been amazing to have you on the show. I'm so grateful that you came today and talked to us and shared with us about your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. It was such a pleasure chatting with you today.
Oh, you too. Take care.
I love how Betty took herself from being someone who was governed by a fairly controlling, detail-oriented personality to becoming someone who is able to fully express herself creatively. Betty guided herself to where she is today, and it all started with a wish and an intention. She honored the wish she felt to become an abstract artist, and she boldly declared that from that day forward, this is what she was. This powerful act allowed her the freedom to shed anything and everything that wasn't serving that vision. She understood the importance of practicing over and over and over again, even when she felt overwhelmed, frustrated and lost, unsure that she would ever get there. I love how she devised clever ways to occupy her analytical mind so that she could sneak off and play with creativity, producing paintings that felt different than anything else she'd ever created. Paintings that she fell in love with. If you take one thing from this episode today, I hope it's this. That wish you feel that you could do better at something, be better at something, be it painting, writing, singing, dancing, that wish is an invitation from creativity itself. It is playfully and hopefully asking you to find ways to occupy your analytical mind and all its limiting beliefs so that you can come out to play. There is magic in that wish, and that magic is for you. I have a fun challenge for you. Forward this episode to the first friends that pop into your mind right now. Don't overthink it. There is a reason you thought of them, and you never know. You might change a life forever. Find Betty's favorite affirmation, see a picture of my favorite Betty Franks painting, and find links to her website in the show notes on kateshepardcreative.com/creativegenius. That's SHEPHERD. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to support the show, please consider joining my Patreon at patreon.com/creativegeniuspodcast. Your support helps make it possible for me to continue bringing you these inspiring conversations with artists every other week. As a Patreon member, you'll have access to things like bonus content, live Ask Me Anything sessions, and even original art sent right to your door. We have an incredible lineup of guests coming up. You won't want to miss a single one. So before you forget, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. And I would love it if you'd head over to iTunes to leave the show a review. I love your feedback. It helps me learn how to continue to evolve and improve the show for you. And did you know you can watch full video of most of our episodes? Head over to kateshepardcreative.com/creativegenius for all the details. Thank you again for listening. May you find and unleash your creative genius.